So President-elect Biden wants the American people to be directly involved in his first 100 days in office by wearing a mask to fight the coronavirus pandemic. He made the comments in his first interview alongside Vice President-elect Harris since they won the election. The two leaders also say that they'll publicly take the COVID-19 vaccine once it's deemed safe. This comes as Dr. Anthony Fauci says he's accepted the offer to join the Biden administration as chief medical advisor to help fight the pandemic. So for the latest on the Biden-Harris transition, let us bring in Ed O'Keefe. Ed, we're going to start things off. Experts agree with President-elect Biden that masks help flatten the curve. That is sort of a foregone conclusion. But doctors we've spoken with also say that contact tracing remains crucial in slowing the spread. Has the Biden-Harris team discussed a plan for comprehensive nationwide contact tracing? Because we do know so far, in at least some areas, contact tracers actually aren't getting a lot of cooperation in many cases.
Yeah, they've talked about it conceptually, Anne-Marie, but they haven't gotten into the specifics because I think, as you've described there, it's a really tricky process to carry out, especially as cases surge in parts of the country where perhaps there wasn't much of a high rate of infection to begin with, and they didn't maybe necessarily have good contact tracing programs in place. What is sort of the general focus right now, again, as you mentioned, is the masking idea. He said that he would ask Americans to essentially join him in wearing masks when in public and when around other people for the first 100 days of his presidency, and hoping that that, plus various local restrictions that are put in place, would help drive down the rate of infection. And he did say, just to clarify there, to sort of to change up the order of things, he did say that he spoke with Dr. Fauci yesterday, asked him to stay on at NIH and to serve as a top medical advisor to the president and be a part of the coronavirus task force that the Biden administration will put together. So in essence, sustaining and then elevating Fauci's role come January 20th.
In yesterday's interview, Mr. Biden gave his stamp of approval for the latest COVID-19 economic relief proposal, that the $908 billion package brought forth by a bipartisan group of lawmakers. Getting a thumbs up from the president-elect, is that likely to help this proposal build more momentum in the House and Senate?
We'll see. I think, if anything, it buoys the House Speaker and Senate Minority Leader's decision to endorse it and push for it, just to sort of show that there's now a unified push among Democrats, at least, to try to get this done. The one thing to keep in mind is that the price tag may change over the weekend as the final details on a plan are put together, and what exactly is in the agreement might also change, and what isn't in the agreement. And so that may be ultimately where this thing gets hung up. But he made clear that no matter what, Congress should expect to do much more on this issue broadly about economic relief in the face of the pandemic once he takes office. And I think at that point, what they'll try to do is say what got done, what in that plan potentially needs to be extended or built upon, and what was left out that we should be working on. So we'll see. They're hesitant to get into too many details because he's not president yet, and he doesn't want to be seen as meddling in negotiations, as delicate as they are. And then they won't really weigh in on what specifically needs to be done until they see what Congress may or may not get done before Christmas.
So you've been reporting that there is, increased pressure for the president-elect to include more diversity in his cabinet. Transition aides met with members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on Thursday, and Biden says that he plans to meet with the NAACP next week. So Vlad and myself actually spoke with the organization's president, Derek Johnson, on CBSN yesterday, and I asked why representation is simply not enough at this point. I want to play some of that sound.
We have to save the morality of this nation and make sure that the historical and decades-long caste system, the racism, is done away with. You can only do that through public policy. He can do that through executive orders. And that's the conversation we need to be having. Not about individuals, but about how do we embed civil rights protections and restore the loss of rights protections in all of the conversations that take place, whether it's the Department of Defense or Department of Agriculture, across the gamut.
So what he was trying to say is, it's good to have individuals of color in prominent, ideally high-ranking positions, but it's not just about getting someone there at the table. You have to also follow up with policies that encourage this inclusivity, that change the inequities that we see in this country. I wonder, is this the same message that Joe Biden is also getting from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. At this point, a lot of his higher, more influential positions, cabinet positions, he's already sort of floated names for them. So I'm wondering if he has a lot of room now to include more Black and Hispanic voices.
Oh, sure. I mean, he still has more than half the cabinet to fill, and several top agencies still need new leaders. And in each of these places, they're going to need strong deputies. And in many ways, the dirty secret in Washington is that cabinet secretary is one thing, but who are the deputies that actually run the place? And how are those positions being filled with people who potentially could be elevated later in an administration into the top job, or be set up to do something else in the future, either in elected politics or in government. It is telling to me, though, Anne Marie, that the NAACP and other groups are now not only pushing for names, but pushing for policy. It makes sense that they would do that, but this began as a call to fill jobs. It did not begin as a call to concern themselves with policy. And to me, that's a signal that they may be getting some sense that they're not necessarily going to be getting what they want in terms of appointments, but that they want to reiterate that throughout the administration at every level, they got to be concerned about civil rights and concerns of minorities. I spoke with the President Johnson myself earlier in the week, Mark Morial of the National Urban League, members of the Hispanic Caucus. All of them say they're pushing for people first because personnel is policy, as Mayor Morial put it. But also, they remind us, as if some people need reminding, that the Trump administration has significantly lacked diversity, not only in the personnel decisions, but frankly in a lot of the policies that have been implemented across the government over the last 4 years, or the policies that were allowed to expire, or the policies that were specifically put in place to, potentially squeeze certain communities. And so, there's a justifiable and understandable belief that the Biden administration has a lot of wrongs to right. And these groups have made clear that they're going to keep that pressure on. But they also know that it'll be easier if there are people in various positions of power and influence inside the government to help make that happen. And as President Johnson had told me, even if the cabinet secretary is in a minority, we'll be making sure that the people around that cabinet secretary reflect the diversity of the department, reflect the diversity of the people who are affected by decisions made by that department. And if we don't see that, the Biden administration will hear about it.
That's a really interesting observation. You got to have both people and policy. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.